The cold was a constant companion. It lived in the worn soles of her boots and the threadbare weave of her cloak. It seeped through the cracks in the walls of her small hut on the edge of the village, a place reserved for the lowest of the low. For Omegas. For her. Ilara drew her knees to her chest, trying to hoard what little warmth her own body could produce. Hunger was a dull ache in her belly, another familiar friend. She was used to it. She was used to the whispers that followed her like stray dogs. The averted eyes, the way the other pack members would cross the dirt track to avoid walking too near her. Worthless, broken, cursed. The words had been etched into her soul by the one person who should have protected her from them, her own mother. Lyra had cast her out years ago, her face a mask of cold disappointment, declaring Ilara an Omega with a finality that had shattered her world. She never understood why. She only understood the loneliness that came after. A scratching sound at her door, small and desperate, pulled her from her bleak thoughts. It was a sound too weak for a person, too timid for a stray dog looking for scraps. Curiosity, a feeling she rarely indulged, pricked at her. She unwrapped herself from her thin blanket and padded to the door, her bare feet protesting against the icy floorboards. When she pulled the heavy wood open a few inches, she saw nothing at first. Just the deepening twilight and the skeletal fingers of the forest that bordered the village. Then, a soft whimper. Ilara looked down. Curled on her doorstep, shivering violently, was a wolf pup. It was impossibly small, its fur a dusty gray, its ears too big for its tiny head. But it was the cold radiating from it that startled her. It was an unnatural chill, a frost that seemed to cling to its fur despite the lack of snow. Her heart, a thing she usually guarded so fiercely, cracked open. An Omega associating with a wolf, even a pup, was forbidden. It was a challenge, a presumption. But she couldn't leave it there to die. Quickly, she glanced around. The village was settling in for the night, smoke curling from chimneys, the sounds of families muffled behind closed doors. No one was watching. She scooped the pup into her arms. It was lighter than she expected, and so cold. It felt like holding a piece of the winter moon. The pup whimpered again but didn't struggle. It pressed its tiny, frigid body against her, seeking a warmth she barely possessed. Inside, she closed the door and carried it to her cot. She laid it on her one blanket and then hurried to the hearth, using the last of her kindling to coax a small, hesitant flame to life. It wasn't much, but it was something. She had a heel of stale bread and a small bowl of thin broth saved for the morning. It was more than she'd had in days. Without a second thought, she crumbled the bread into the broth, warming it by the meager fire until it was lukewarm. She brought the bowl to the cot, dipping her finger into the mush and holding it to the pup's nose. It sniffed weakly, then its little pink tongue darted out, licking her finger clean. Hope, bright and painful, flared in her chest. She continued to feed it, fingerful by fingerful, until the bowl was empty. The pup, filled with a little food, seemed to gain a sliver of strength. It crawled into the curve of her body as she lay down, its cold fur a strange contrast to the warmth blooming inside her. For the first time in a very long time, Ilara didn't feel entirely alone. She wrapped the blanket around them both, sharing her body heat, and fell into a deeper sleep than she had known in years. The morning brought panic. The pup was still alive, its coldness having receded to a more normal temperature. It licked her chin with surprising energy. The joy was immediately followed by terror. What had she done? Someone would find out. The punishment for an Omega breaking such a core rule would be severe. She had to return it. But to where? It had no scent of a mother, no pack markings she could recognize. It just smelled of pine and deep winter, a scent that was both wild and strangely clean. Her decision was made for her. Shouts echoed from the village center. The Alpha's guard. Their heavy footfalls were unmistakable. They were searching for something. Her blood ran cold. It couldn't be. She held the pup tight, its little heart beating a frantic rhythm against her own. She had to hide it, but there was nowhere to go. Her hut was a single, bare room. A heavy fist pounded on her door, making the wood shudder in its frame. "Omega, open up!" Her hands trembled. The pup whined, sensing her fear. She whispered reassurances, stroking its soft fur. Taking a deep breath, she walked to the door and opened it. Two guards stood there, massive and imposing in their leather armor. Their eyes scanned her dismissively, then widened as they saw the bundle in her arms. "By the ancients," one of them breathed, his hand going to the hilt of his sword. "She has him." Him? Confusion warred with her fear. Before she could ask, a path was cleared through the gathering villagers. A presence swept through the crowd, silencing the whispers and bowing the heads. He was a tempest in the form of a man. The Alpha King, Kale. He was larger than any man she had ever seen, with shoulders broad enough to carry the weight of his entire kingdom. His hair was black as a starless night, and his face was carved from harsh, beautiful lines. But it was his eyes that held her captive. They were the color of a frozen lake, pale and piercing, and they held a loneliness so profound it mirrored her own. A chill followed him, a palpable aura of cold that had nothing to do with the morning air. It was the same unnatural cold she had felt from the pup. He walked past his guards, past everyone, his gaze locked on her. He stopped just a few feet away, and the world seemed to hold its breath. "You have something of mine," he said. His voice was not loud, but it resonated deep in her bones, a low rumble of thunder and falling snow. Terrified, she held out the pup. "I found him, in the woods. He was cold, so I—" Her voice trailed off, pathetic and small. She was an Omega. She had no right to explain herself to a king. The king did not look at her. His gaze was fixed on the pup. He reached out a hand, and she flinched, expecting a blow. But his gloved fingers were surprisingly gentle as they stroked the pup's head. The pup, which had been trembling, immediately settled, letting out a soft yip of recognition. Kale's icy eyes finally lifted to meet hers. There was something in them she couldn't decipher. Not anger, not gratitude. It was a raw, searching confusion. "Thank you for your kindness," he said, the word sounding foreign on his tongue. He took the pup from her arms. The loss of its small, warm weight was immediate and sharp. She bowed her head, waiting for the verdict. "Your Majesty." He turned to leave, and she thought that was it. She would be left alone with the echoes of her terror. But then he stopped. He looked from the pup nestled in his arm back to her, a deep frown creasing his brow. "Fen was not lost," he said, his voice quiet but carrying to every listening ear. The villagers gasped. "He has never left my side before." Alara's head snapped up. She stared at him, her heart hammering against her ribs. What did he mean? She had found the pup miles from the keep, alone and freezing. The king, Kale, looked at her as if seeing her for the first time. He was the most powerful man in the world, a king whose name was a whispered legend of ruthlessness and cold control. And he was looking at her, a worthless Omega, with an expression of pure, unadulterated shock. The pup had sought her out, and he had no idea why. "You will come with me," he commanded. It was not a request. He turned and began walking back toward the keep, not waiting to see if she obeyed. His guards fell in around her, their faces grim. She had no choice. She was being taken to the Alpha King's keep. Her life as a forgotten Omega was over. She didn't know if this was a rescue or a death sentence. The walk to the keep was a blur of terrified silence. The villagers stared, their shock turning to suspicion and jealousy. An Omega, singled out by the king? Unheard of. Ilara kept her eyes on the dirt path, feeling the burn of their gazes like a brand. The keep itself was a fortress of dark stone and towering spires, a place of power she had only ever seen from a distance. Inside, it was vast and cold, the air thick with the scent of old magic and wood smoke. Servants and nobles alike stopped and stared as she was escorted through the great halls, a stray lamb brought into the lion's den. She was led to a suite of rooms. They were larger than her entire hut, furnished with a soft bed, a heavy oak wardrobe, and a fireplace that was already blazing with a cheerful fire. It was more luxury than she had ever known. It felt like a trap. A servant girl, barely older than her, left a tray of food: roast meat, fresh bread, cheese, and a change of clothes before scurrying away without a word. Alara didn't touch the food. She stood in the middle of the room, her threadbare cloak still wrapped around her, and trembled. Why was she here? What did he want from her? The king's words echoed in her mind. He has never left my side before. The pup, Fen, had chosen her. It had run from the absolute power of the Alpha King to find her, a nobody. It made no sense. Later that evening, he came. He entered without knocking, a silent shadow filling the doorway. The pup, Fen, was trotting at his heels. The moment Fen saw her, he bounded across the room and jumped into her lap, licking her hands and face with frantic affection. Alara automatically wrapped her arms around the pup, burying her face in his soft fur. She felt a strange sense of rightness, of coming home. Kale watched them, his expression unreadable. The cold aura around him seemed to diminish the fire in the hearth. He was still wearing his dark formal attire, but he seemed less a king and more a man burdened by a heavy, invisible weight. He would not settle, Kale said, his voice a low murmur. He has done nothing but pace and whine since we returned. She looked up at him, clutching Fen protectively. I don't understand, Your Majesty. Neither do I, he admitted, and the honesty in his tone surprised her. He walked closer, stopping before her chair. He crouched down, bringing him to her eye level. It was a gesture of such unexpected humility that it stole her breath. Up close, she could see the faint lines of exhaustion around his eyes, the almost imperceptible frost that seemed to cling to his eyelashes. Fen is a part of me, he said slowly, choosing his words with care. He is not a normal wolf. He is the heart of my wolf, given form. Where I go, he goes. He cannot be separated from me. And yet, he left. He found you. Her mind struggled to grasp the meaning. The heart of his wolf? It was a concept from old legends, a bond so deep the shifter's spirit could manifest physically. It was a sign of immense ancient power. Why? She whispered. The question aimed at him, at the universe, at the pup currently snuggled against her. Kale reached out, his gloved hand hesitating before it rested on Fen's back. His knuckles brushed against her wrist. A jolt, sharp and electric, shot up her arm. It wasn't the cold she expected. It was heat. A sudden, shocking warmth that made her gasp. He pulled his hand back as if burned, staring at the point of contact. What was that? I don't know, she stammered. He looked at her then, truly looked. His icy gaze swept over her, not with the disdain of a king for an Omega, but with a dawning, intense curiosity. You are an Omega, from the Blackwood Pack, cast out. He recited the facts as if reading from a ledger. Yes, Your Majesty. Omegas have no magic, no connection to the pack bond. They are nulls. He was speaking to himself now, trying to fit a piece into a puzzle where it simply didn't belong. But you are not a null. I felt it. A warmth. He was the coldest being she had ever encountered, a man whose very presence lowered the temperature of a room, and he was talking about her warmth. It was absurd. I have nothing, Your Majesty, she said, the old, familiar shame washing over her. I am just Alara. Just Alara, he repeated softly. He looked at Fen, who was now sleeping peacefully in her lap, content for the first time that day. Fen seems to disagree. He established a routine. He did not confine her, but he did not release her. She was a guest, a prisoner, a curiosity. During the day, she was left alone in her rooms, but every evening he would appear at her door with Fen. He said it was for the pup. He said Fen needed her calming presence to rest. It was a flimsy excuse, and they both knew it. They began to talk, hesitantly at first. She was terrified of him, of his power, of his status. He was a man who hadn't had a real conversation with anyone who wasn't a subordinate or an enemy in centuries. He learned of her life in the village, of the hunger and the loneliness. She spoke of it not with self-pity, but with a simple, factual resilience that seemed to fascinate him. He never spoke of his own past, but she saw it in the haunted depths of his eyes. She learned that the cold that clung to him was a curse, a result of his immense power turning inward, slowly consuming him. He had not felt genuine warmth in over 100 years, until he touched her. One night he arrived looking more tired than she had ever seen him. The frost on his cloak was thicker, his skin paler. He sank into the chair opposite hers, the picture of exhaustion. Fen, instead of coming to her, went to his master and nudged his hand, whining softly. "The cold is worse today," she stated quietly. It wasn't a question. He nodded, his eyes closed. It is a constant battle. Some days are harder than others. On pure instinct, she rose and went to the small table where a pot of tea had been left. She poured a cup, her hand steady, and brought it to him. "Here," she said. He opened his eyes and looked at the steaming cup, then at her. He made no move to take it. She thought she had overstepped, and her courage faltered. "My apologies, Your Majesty." "Don't." He cut her off, his voice rough. "Don't call me that." He reached for the cup, and his bare fingers brushed against hers. The jolt was stronger this time, a wave of heat that was almost painful. It was like plunging her hand from ice water into a hot spring. He hissed, dropping the cup. It shattered on the stone floor, the hot liquid hissing as it met the chill radiating from his boots. He stared at his hand, then at her, his eyes wide with disbelief. "That warmth. It is you. It comes from you." She looked at her own hands, plain and calloused. They were the hands of an Omega, of a servant. They held no magic. They couldn't. "It's impossible," she whispered. "Is it?" He stood up, towering over her. He was so close she could feel the Arctic air from his body, but where his gaze touched her skin, she felt a strange fire. "Everything about you is impossible. An Omega who can calm my wolf. A null who generates a heat I haven't felt since I was a child. A cast-out who my soul sought out for reasons I cannot comprehend." He took a step closer, and she had to tilt her head back to look at him. The distance between them was electric. This was the boundary he had tried to maintain. The king and the Omega, the powerful and the worthless. And it was crumbling to dust. "I don't know what I am," she confessed, her voice trembling. "But I am not afraid of you." It was the truest thing she had ever said. She was afraid of his power, of his station, of the precariousness of her situation. But him? The man behind the crown? The lonely soul being eaten alive by his own strength? She was not afraid of him. A flicker of something that looked like wonder crossed his face. "You should be." "Why?" "Because I am a monster," he said, his voice dropping to a raw whisper. "I am being consumed by a frost that will one day turn my heart to ice, and I find myself wanting to steal your warmth, to hoard it like a dragon hoards gold. It is a selfish, dangerous thing to want." Her heart ached for him. "You are not a monster." He reached out, his hand hovering in the air between them. He wanted to touch her again. She could see the war in his eyes, the desperate need battling against centuries of control. She made the choice for him. She lifted her hand and placed it against his cheek. His skin was like marble, impossibly cold. He flinched, but didn't pull away. Under her palm, she felt a faint warmth begin to build, her own heat fighting against his frost. He closed his eyes, a shudder racking his massive frame. A sound escaped his lips, a groan of relief so profound it was almost a sob. Ilara, he breathed her name, and it was a prayer. In that moment, the world fell away. There was no king, no Omega. There were only two broken souls finding a flicker of light in each other's darkness. He leaned into her touch, his cold armor cracking under the gentle pressure of her hand. This was the moment, the unspoken confession, the realization that they were two halves of something ancient and powerful. This connection was why Fen had run to her. It was why her touch was the only thing that could fight his curse. Love, she realized with a dizzying shock. This was what it felt like. It wasn't a fairy tale. It was this. Terrifying and real and necessary. The peace was shattered by a commotion in the hall. Shouts, and the sound of the royal guard being thrown aside. The door to her chambers burst open. A woman stood there, her face a thundercloud of fury. She was elegant, powerful, her presence commanding. Her eyes, the same shade of deep forest green as Ilara's own, widened in horror as she took in the scene. Her daughter, the Omega, touching the Alpha King with an impossible intimacy. "Get away from him, you curse!" Her mother, Lyra, snarled. The past had just kicked down the door. Lyra strode into the room, her fury a palpable force. The royal guards who tried to stop her were held back by her own retinue, stern-faced warriors from the Blackwood pack. Kyle straightened instantly, moving to stand in front of Ilara, shielding her with his body. The cold in the room dropped, becoming a weapon. "Lyra." Kale's voice was pure ice. "You are a long way from home, and you are not welcome in my keep." "I have come for what is mine," Lyra shot back, her gaze fixed on Ilara with a venom that made her flinch. "I have come for the stain I failed to scrub out years ago." "She is under my protection," Kale stated, his voice leaving no room for argument. Lyra let out a harsh, disbelieving laugh. "His protection? Girl, do you have any idea what you are doing? You will kill him. Your very presence is poison to him." "What are you talking about?" Ilara found her voice, stepping out from behind Kale. She would not hide. Not anymore. "I cast you out to save you, you fool." Lyra's voice cracked with a pain that stunned Ilara. "And to save everyone else from you. Our bloodline is cursed. We carry a power that is unbalanced, a force without control. It killed your father. It drove him mad, made him burn from the inside out. I saw the same chaotic spark in you when you were a child." Her words were hammer blows, a hidden power. Her father, dead from it? It was too much to comprehend. "You are lying," Ilara whispered, but a cold dread told her it was the truth. It explained the flashes of strange energy she'd sometimes felt as a child, the odd things that happened when she was angry or scared. "I am a seer, girl. I saw your future," Lyra continued, her voice dropping to a chilling whisper. "I saw you standing over the frozen body of a king, his power shattered, his kingdom in ruins, all because you bound yourself to him. This power of yours, it doesn't create. It takes. It's a vortex. It will drain his magic, his life force, to feed itself. It will consume him until there is nothing left." Ilara looked at Kyle. She saw the truth of her mother's words reflected in his own conflicted eyes, the warmth he felt from her. Was it just her power siphoning off his? Was she a parasite, killing him even as she soothed him? "The cold," Ilara breathed, horrified. "It's been worse since I arrived." Kale didn't deny it. "The bond between us is making my power unstable," he admitted, his voice tight. "But it is not draining me, it's reacting, trying to merge." "It is a lie you tell yourself before the end," Lyra shrieked. "I will not let you make the same mistake I did." I will not watch another man be destroyed by this curse. She looked at Kael, her eyes pleading. Your Majesty, I beg you, give her to me. I have the rituals to sever this power from her. It is the only way to save you both. Sever the power. The words implied a violence that made Alara's stomach turn. No, Kyle said, his voice absolute. I will not. A political game began. Lyra was not just a mother. She was a powerful elder with influence over several allied pacts. She began to spread whispers through the court. The king was compromised. The Omega was a foreign agent, a curse, a witch who was draining his life. The nobles, already wary of Alara's sudden elevation, began to murmur. The pact's stability was paramount. Was the king sacrificing it for a worthless Omega? Alara saw the toll it was taking on Kael. He was caught between his duty and his heart. He spent his days in tense council meetings, his nights growing colder and more exhausted. The strain was breaking him, and she was the cause. Her mother's prophecy haunted her. I saw you standing over the frozen body of a king. What if she was right? What if Alara's love was the very thing that would destroy him? She had to make a choice. A week after her mother's arrival, Alara went to Kael. He was in his study, poring over maps, the candlelight casting deep shadows under his eyes. Fen was asleep at his feet, but his rest was fitful. Kyle, she said softly. He looked up, and the weariness on his face was a physical blow, but his eyes softened when he saw her. Alara. This has to stop, she said, her voice shaking. You are tearing your kingdom apart for me. Let it tear, he said fiercely, rising from his chair. I will not give you to her. I will not let you go. You don't have a choice, she said, tears welling in her eyes. She's right. I am hurting you. My love is a poison. No, he growled, crossing the room to stand before her. He took her face in his hands, his touch cold but desperate. Your love is the only thing that has ever felt real. It is the only thing that has kept the ice at bay. We will find another way. But she knew there was no other way. As long as she was here, he would be forced to choose between her and his people. He would choose her, and he would lose everything. She couldn't let that happen. She loved him too much. This was her sacrifice. Not for a prophecy, but for him. Let me go, she whispered, her heart breaking. Please, let me go with her. It's the only way to save you. I would rather freeze than live in a world without your warmth, he said, his voice thick with emotion. And I would rather die than be the cause of it, she countered. She leaned in and pressed a soft, desperate kiss to his lips. It was their first and last. It was full of a love that had bloomed too fast and a goodbye that had come too soon. He froze, stunned by her action and the searing heat of her kiss. In that moment of hesitation, she pulled away. I choose this, she said, her voice gaining a strength she didn't know she possessed. She turned and walked out of the study, leaving him standing there, his heart in her hands. She went straight to her mother's chambers. Lyra was waiting, as if she knew she would come. I'll go with you, Alara said, her voice devoid of emotion. Do what you have to do. Lyra's expression was not one of triumph. It was one of deep, soul-crushing sorrow. It is for the best, she whispered. Before Kael could recover, before he could stop them, Lyra's guards had her. They were spirited out of the keep through a secret passage. The last thing Alara heard was Kael's roar of pure, unadulterated fury echoing through the stone halls. It was the sound of a heart being ripped from its chest. And then, silence. The world became a cage. Lyra took her far away, to a secluded and forgotten monastery carved into a remote mountainside. It was a place of silence and stone, where the air was thin and cold. Alara was kept in a small, bare cell, no better than her hut in the village. But this time, the lock was on the outside. Days bled into weeks. Her only human contact was with her mother. Lyra would bring her food, just enough to keep her alive, and sit with her in silence. The fury was gone from her mother's eyes, replaced by a terrible, weary grief. "Why did you hate me so much?" Alara asked one day, her voice raspy from disuse. Lyra looked up, startled. "Hate you? Alara, I never hated you. I loved you so much I chose to become a monster to protect you." Slowly, painfully, the full story came out. Lyra had been deeply in love with Alara's father, a powerful wolf with the same chaotic, untamed magic. She had ignored the warnings, believing her love could temper his power, but it had only fueled it. It grew until it consumed him, burning him alive in a conflagration of wild magic. Lyra had been pregnant with Alara at the time. She had been forced to watch the man she loved die in agony. "When you were born, I saw it in you," Lyra whispered, tears tracking through the lines on her face. "The same spark, the same uncontrolled potential. The seers confirmed it. They showed me the vision of you and the Frozen King. I couldn't watch it happen again. Casting you out, branding you an Omega to suppress your connection to pack magic. I thought it would keep the power dormant. I thought I was saving you from your father's fate. It was a twisted, suffocating kind of love, a love born from terror." Alara looked at her mother and felt not rage, but a profound, aching pity. Lyra had been living in her own prison of fear for Alara's entire life. Though she was locked away, news of the outside world trickled in. A sympathetic novice, a young girl named Anya, would sneak to her cell and whisper what she'd heard from traveling merchants. The Alpha King was on a rampage. They called him the Winter King now, the Frost-Hearted. Without Alara's warmth, the cold that had been slowly consuming him had accelerated, taking over. His kingdom was locked in an unnatural winter. He ruled with an iron fist and a frozen heart, his grief and rage making him more ruthless than ever. He was tearing apart the territories of his allies, hunting for any sign of Lyra or her pack. The whispers said he was no longer a man, but a force of nature, a blizzard of pure, cold fury. And Fen, the pup, was fading. Anya had heard a rumor from a courtier's servant. The king's spirit wolf was dying. It lay on a silk cushion by the frozen throne, a frail, shivering wisp of what it once was. With every day that passed, it grew more translucent. The news was a knife in Alara's heart. Her sacrifice hadn't saved him. It had broken him. It was accelerating his demise. Her mother's prophecy was coming true, not because of her presence, but because of her absence. She had to get back to him, but she was weak, starved, and powerless. Her mother was preparing for the ritual, a complex rite that would sever her magic permanently. Lyra claimed it would save Alara's life, but Alara knew it would just leave her an empty shell. The ritual was in 3 days, on the night of the solstice. She told Anya, "You have to help me. I have to escape." Anya was terrified. "They would kill me." "They are going to kill him," Alara countered, her voice desperate. "My king. He is dying because I am not there." Seeing the fierce, unwavering love in Alara's eyes, the young novice made a choice. That night, she stole the key to Alara's cell. "Go," she whispered, pressing a small bundle of food and a heavy cloak into Alara's hands. "Follow the river north. May the ancients guide you." Alara ran. She ran through the frozen night, her lungs burning, her legs screaming in protest. She had no idea how far she had to go, only that Kale was at the end of the path, and he needed her. But she didn't get far. Lyra's warriors were expert trackers. They found her within a day, collapsed from exhaustion in the snow. She was dragged back to the monastery, no longer a daughter but a prisoner. Lyra's face was set like stone. The time for sorrow was over. "The ritual will happen tonight," she declared. "I will not let you destroy everything." The crisis had arrived. They dragged her to the monastery's central chamber. It was a circular room, open to the sky, the floor covered in a complex array of silver inlay and carved runes. Her mother and a circle of elders stood waiting, their faces grim. Alara fought, but she was weak. They forced her to the center of the circle and bound her wrists and ankles with chains that felt unnaturally cold, draining what little strength she had left. "Mother, please," she begged one last time. "You're wrong. He needs me." "Silence," Lyra commanded, her voice trembling but resolute. "I am saving you." The ritual began. The elders chanted in an ancient tongue, their voices rising and falling, pulling at the very air in the room. The silver lines on the floor began to glow with a sickly green light. The energy coiled around Alara, invasive and painful, searching for the core of her power. It felt like 1,000 icy needles probing her soul. She screamed as the magic latched onto something deep inside her, something she had never known she possessed. It began to pull, trying to rip her power from her spirit. The agony was beyond anything she had ever imagined. And then she heard it, a roar of pure, world-breaking rage that shook the very foundations of the mountain. Kale. The doors to the chamber exploded inward, blasted into splinters by a wave of ice and fury. Kale stood there, but he was barely recognizable. His eyes glowed with a terrifying pale blue light. Frost coated his armor and his hair. The air around him shimmered with cold. He was the Winter King, a god of ice and sorrow. "Release her," he commanded, his voice the grinding of glaciers. Lyra's warriors moved to intercept him, but it was a futile gesture. He moved through them like a storm, his power throwing them aside without a touch. But Lyra had been prepared for this. The circle of elders intensified their chant, and a shield of green energy flared up around the ritual circle, blocking Kale's path. He slammed his fist against the barrier, and it shuddered, cracks of frost spreading across its surface. But it held. He was trapped outside, forced to watch. Their eyes met across the shimmering shield. The agony and fury in his gaze mirrored her own. He was helpless. He had come for her, torn the world apart to find her, and he was being forced to watch her die. "Ilara!" he roared, his voice cracking with desperation. Lyra saw him, and her face hardened. "You see? He came, just as the vision foretold. I must finish this now." She placed her hands on Alara's head, and the full force of the ritual poured into her. The pain was absolute. It was tearing her apart. Her vision went white. She could feel her life force, her very soul, being unraveled. She looked at Kale, at his beautiful, tormented face. She saw the love there, a love so fierce it challenged the heavens. And she knew what she had to do. Her mother was wrong about the prophecy. It wasn't a warning, it was a choice. She could let her power be ripped from her, which would surely kill her, or she could fight back, unleashing it, and risk becoming the monster her mother feared. But there was a third option. She would not fight. She would not let her mother win, but she would not become a weapon. She looked at Kale, pouring all her love, all her sorrow, all her hope into that final gaze. She could feel his love in return, a desperate anchor in the storm. "It's okay," she thought, her consciousness beginning to fade. "I love you." She stopped fighting the ritual. She let go. She accepted the agony, accepted the end. She chose to die, not as a victim, but as a sacrifice. A willing sacrifice to end this cycle of pain, to free her mother from fear, and to save the man she loved from her own perceived curse. She accepted death. And in that moment of absolute surrender, something broke. The green parasitic energy of the ritual, expecting resistance, found none. It poured into the void she had created, and instead of ripping her power out, it was consumed by it. A new energy erupted from her, not of fire or ice, but of pure, silent will. It was not a violent explosion. It was a wave of absolute stillness, a pressure that bent reality. Telekinesis. Force. The chains binding her turned to dust. The glowing runes on the floor went dark. The shield of green energy dissolved into nothing. The chanting of the elders cut off as they were gently but irresistibly pushed back, sent sliding across the floor to the edges of the room, unharmed but powerless. Lyra, who had her hands on Alara's head, was thrown backward as if by a silent giant, landing in a heap 10 feet away. The chamber fell into a profound silence. Alara stood in the center of the circle, unbound. A soft, silvery light emanated from her skin. She felt whole. The part of her that had always felt empty was now filled with a quiet, humming power that was entirely her own. It was calm. It was controlled. It was hers. She had not become a monster. She had become herself. Kale stared, his glowing eyes wide with awe. The wave of force had parted around him, leaving him untouched. He saw not a curse, but a miracle. He saw his queen. The moment the shield fell, he was moving. He crossed the room in 2 strides and swept her into his arms. He held her with a desperation that spoke of weeks of terror and loneliness. She buried her face in his chest, breathing in his scent of winter and pine. But the cold was gone. Where she touched him, his skin was no longer like ice. It was cool, but it was the coolness of a living man. Her power, now unbound, wasn't draining him. It was balancing him. Her gentle, controlling force was soothing the chaotic ice of his own magic. "I have you," he whispered into her hair, his voice thick with unshed tears. "I have you." "You found me," she sobbed, clinging to him as if she might float away. From the corner of the room, a shimmer of light appeared near Kale's feet. Fen materialized, no longer translucent and weak, but solid and vibrant, his gray fur shining. He yipped happily and began running in joyful circles around their feet. Their bond, broken and strained, was now forged anew, stronger than ever. Alara looked over Kale's shoulder at her mother. Lyra was pushing herself up, her face a mask of disbelief and terror. "What? What are you?" Lyra stammered. Alara gently pulled away from Kale, though he kept a steadying hand on her back. She walked toward her mother. Lyra flinched, expecting a blow, a blast of the power she had feared for so long, but Alara just knelt in front of her. She looked at this woman who had caused her so much pain, this woman trapped by a ghost from the past, and felt only a deep, profound sadness. "I am your daughter," Alara said, her voice soft but firm, resonating with her newfound power. "And I am not my father. The power is not a curse, Mother. Your fear was the curse. It's what twisted everything." She reached out, her hand glowing with that soft silver light. She didn't touch her mother. She simply held her hand out, and in the space between them, an image formed in Lyra's mind, a vision, not of a frozen king and a ruined kingdom, but of Kale and Alara, standing together, his ice and her force in perfect harmony, a kingdom thriving under their balanced rule, a vision of peace. Lyra gasped, her eyes widening as she saw the future she had tried so hard to prevent was a lie, a misinterpretation of her fear. The prophecy was not about destruction, it was about union. Tears streamed down Lyra's face, tears of grief, of regret, of a lifetime of wasted fear. "What have I done?" she wept. Kyle stepped forward, his expression hard as flint. "She deserves death for what she did to you." "No," Alara said, without looking away from her mother. "She deserves to be free." She looked at Lyra. "You will be stripped of your title as elder. You will give up your right to see. You will live out your days as a normal woman, no longer burdened by visions of a future you can't control. You will be free from the fear that has been your prison. It was not the justice of a king. It was not death or imprisonment. It was mercy. A mercy far more profound than any punishment." Lyra looked at her daughter, truly seeing her for the first time, and nodded, her body racked with sobs of release. Months passed. True winter came and went, but the unnatural cold in Kale's kingdom had vanished, replaced by the normal rhythm of the seasons. Ilara stood beside him on the balcony of the great keep, no longer an Omega in rags, but a queen in simple, elegant gowns of deep blue. She was his partner in every sense of the word. Her calm, steadying power was the perfect anchor for his own vast, tempestuous magic. Where his frost could protect their borders, her force could build and mend. They ruled together, a perfect balance of ice and will. The whispers in the court had long since died, replaced by a deep, abiding respect. The Omega who had been found in a hovel was now the heart of their kingdom, the woman whose quiet strength had saved their king from himself. Kale came to stand behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist. He rested his chin on her shoulder, his breath warm against her skin. "What are you thinking about?" he murmured. "Everything," she answered honestly. "The hut, the cold, a little lost pup on my doorstep." He smiled, a true, warm smile that still made her heart skip a beat. "He was never lost, my love. His soul knew where its other half was, even when I was too blind to see it." As if summoned, Fen trotted onto the balcony, no longer a tiny pup, but a handsome young wolf. He sat at their feet, leaning against both of them, a living symbol of their complete and unbreakable bond. Ilara leaned back against Kale's chest, feeling the steady beat of his heart. She was home. She had a name, a purpose, a family. She had been born in the cold, cast out into loneliness, and made to believe she was worthless. But a love as fierce as a winter storm had found her, and a power she never knew she had had set her free. She was not the curse, she was the cure, and in the arms of her winter king she was finally, incandescently warm.